Hello everyone, welcome to Banking Frontiers. My name is Manoj Agrawal, I'm the group editor, and today we are doing a roundtable, a panel discussion on a very important topic, early warning systems. Acha din for lenders. Uh, the lending business has of course gone through a lot of challenges thanks to the COVID and lockdown, but it has also undergone a lot of transformation, business transformation, digital transformation, strategic transformation as well. So I think with all this, we can look forward to better days ahead. So let's get into this 1 hour panel discussion. And we also have an IT company along with the BFSI companies with us, that is Peridian Technologies. They will also participate and value add in this discussion. So, gentlemen, welcome to this panel discussion by Banking Frontiers, Early Warning Systems, Acha Din for Lenders. May I request each of you to briefly introduce yourself and your role in your organization so that everyone is familiar with each other. Then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Rishikant Dubey. I am working as a Chief Risk Officer in Muthoot Microfin. I'm responsible for complete risk management practices in the Muthoot Microfin as a group as well as an organization. We are looking for credit, market, and operational risks all together, and all risk, including the enterprise level risk management in the organization. So that is my role. And recently, I have joined Muthoot Microfin. Before that, I am having a 13 year of experience in the Bank of India and 2 years in Ujjivan Small Finance Bank. So that's my background.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vijay Kumar, working with Centrum Financial Services Limited. It's a startup in VFC. It's been in existence for 3 years. I head collections across verticals: real estate, commercial finance, MSME, supply chain finance. So we have just got our banking license, small finance banking soon, and happy to be part of the panel.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everyone, and happy to join this discussion with the esteemed panelists. I'm Kunal Katpal. I'm the Chief Risk Officer with Hinduja Leyland Finance. We are largely a commercial vehicle loan business, but we also do loan against property, affordable housing loan as well in our subsidiary company. I have an overall of 21 years of experience. Started with the policy execution role and then internal audit, and then today, since last almost about 7-8 years working in the ERM space in the risk management function, and now as a chief risk officer. So from policy creation from policy execution, now I've moved into policy creation role. So happy to share my views, and the views that I'll be sharing over here will be personal capacity and not the views of my company. So thank you so much for having me.
Good afternoon, all, and nice to meet you all. My name is Thiru. I'm the CEO of Kinara Capital. We are a Bangalore-based NBFC. Started 10 years before. We have presence in 6 states. We are managing 1,000 crore portfolio as of now. And I'm in this microfinance and micro enterprise lending sector for the last 21 years. Worked across different microfinance company and micro lending company, and happy to be part of this eminent panel, and thanks for the opportunity to Banking Frontiers and Speridian.
Well, I am the Chief Risk Officer for Adani Capital and Adani Housing. We are into affordable housing. We are into commercial vehicle, farm equipments, supply chain, MSME, and bit of corporate finance also. And I've been in risk management for close to about 20 years, and I handle enterprise risk, collections, policy, fraud, and as well as the market risk and the operational risk for Adani Capital.
So let's jump into our discussion. My first question is kind of a little bit of a generic question, but what factors do you think will drive growth of debt itself? What will give people the confidence to go ahead and take a loan, whether it's an individual or a business? Let me share a couple of graphs that I have here. So I picked up some graphs about debt to GDP ratio. The first one is about Japan. So this is currently at 266%. as 238% earlier. It's an indication of the rate of growth. Here it is about Singapore, 131% today. Today as in last year, 2020, compared to 112% 2 years ago. So we can see that there is substantial growth. And for the developed economies, this is more than 100%. In the case of Singapore and Japan, here's another one, 108%. Here's another one, 66%. So as all these graphs indicate, the debt to GDP ratio is a good indicator, may not be the best. But what is your personal thinking? The taking in of debt and leveraging debt for business growth, for personal growth. Who would like to start?
Yeah, regarding the debt to GDP ratio, it's there are two sides of the coin. Whether we should have a balance between the debt and GDP, our debt should be high, our GDP should be high. But we need to understand why this debt is increasing and why this GDP is going down. Because of this pandemic and all, our growth has still stalled. Means economic activities has been little bit affected and all. So revenues have been reduced for the government. So one option for the government is to increase the debt only. If we see in India, it has been increased from 74% to 90% currently. But the way it is like that, the way economic activity will start this and GDP will going to increase, ultimately our debt to GDP ratio is going to be eased down. But one thing we need to understand, debt is very important component to growth also, because without debt also the growth will not be accelerated, because credit growth is very much required in the environment. If the credit growth will not be there, our GDP growth will also be again affected. So both has to go side by side. We have to increase our debt also and our GDP also, because GDP is one of the indicator where we can see that whether my country is performing or not performing, whether it is well versed with the economic situation. So the situation currently is like we need to be very careful with debt also, since the demand for the debt is going to increase because economy has to pick up. If you see the results of the banks also, SDFC Bank has recently posted that 14% credit growth is there. But credit growth, where it is going? Whether it is going towards the corporate, whether it is going towards the individual, or whether it is going towards the consumption, or whether for the manufacturing or any economic activity. So we need to be very careful at that time where the growth is going to head. Either this debt is really utilized for the economic activity, which is going to contribute to my GDP, and my GDP is simultaneously going to up and rebalance my debt to GDP ratio. So that is very important. In this current situation, with this particular type of ratio across the board in whole world, if we are seeing that debt is increasing to the GDP, we need to be very cautious in India. And we are aware also that since as the time passes on, economic activity will pick up, this ratio is going to be eased down. And the normal debt to GDP ratio situation like in India and all economy, it should be 60%. If it is around 60%, it's very good. So we are seeing a very good credit growth in future. This is also an indicator. And by that, if the economic activity goes down, this particular ratio will ease down. This is my thought.
Thanks, very interesting. Can someone also comment on debt to personal GDP, as not national GDP, but personal wealth, personal productivity? What kind of ratios make sense for an individual and for a business? Should the debt to business ratio for an organization, if it goes too high or too low, is that also a risk factor?
Debt, when it comes to whether it is individual or an institution, it is enabler. You mobilize the capital required to grow your business or grow your asset to a point where you can generate some revenue and repay it. If that becomes a huge burden and you get crumpled over it, and we have seen many individuals and institutions going down the drain just because they've not had a good sight on their debt and what level they can manage it. So whether it is personal finance, corporate finance, or at a country level also, we need to have a clear eye and where is it getting mobilized? Is it revenue generation or is it just consumption and not resulting in any kind of revenue or asset creation? So this is something that we should be wary of?
Yeah, I think I completely
Yes.
agree with Vijay, because we kind of a same fraternity in the collection, and you know what happens really when a customer goes overboard with the debt. I think most critical factor for debt, whether it is for a personal, corporate, or a country, is about the utilization of the debt. I think, is it utilization for a for a capital expansion? Are we looking for a long-term annuity business that we are looking at, or are we looking at a working capital that fuels your day-to-day activity? I think there has to be balance between your utilization of the debt for a working capital as well as for asset creation. Now, the asset creation happens gradually. I mean, any business does not accumulate asset, within a short period of time. I think these two has to be balanced. You also have to grow your business, also look at asset creation for yourself and for your customers as well as for the nation. Now, unless all these things grow together, then obviously your debt also should grow and obviously reach a plateau where you will be able to mobilize yourself, and the debt actually comes down. So it's like a parabolic curve, that you start with debt, and then at some point of time you look at a debt consolidation also.
So any risk factors in the current way debt is being consumed? Maybe Kunal or Thiru have some viewpoint.
From a current COVID perspective, when we think about this household debt, what we have observed or kind of internally thought about is the household debt is one important factor, which is like which could be anything related to retail loans or any of the business loans or crop loans, even for agriculture for that matter. So from that perspective, in the first wave, what we saw from another angle is that the deposits in the bank or deposits as a thing was actually higher, because the expenditure was kind of less during the first wave. But in the second wave, we didn't see the similar kind of expenditure. Actually, the deposit level has come down in the second wave, because of the expenditure in the health has actually increased quite a bit. So that's another angle. The thing is, the health expenditure, when it goes high, that also will kind of signifies that there will be high demand in the market for debt, particularly for the health expenditure. And obviously the lockdown situation from the first one and the second one also has been totally different. So that way, the credit demand in the first wave was kind of comparatively less, and obviously NBFCs like us, we were a little more cautious and not kind of disbursing too much. But in the second wave, because the lockdowns were at a different part in different level, and it was kind of gradually kind of opened up in some places, closed in some places, the credit demand was not that much impacted. So these are all the two things I think I would say from my viewpoint.
Just one comment, from the agreeing to all the panelists. So debt, so the risk, talking about the risk about the debt, see, some way or the other, we will be able to get the debt. Now we have to have a plan or systematic approach or what. So that if we don't do it properly, then all the risk will come. So the planning or the taking a debt after taking a plan, so that part is very important. Otherwise, you have major risk.
Absolutely. Debt doesn't pay for itself automatically. Definitely.
Yeah.
Kunal, do you have any perspective on the ratio of debt to income or any particular risk factor? Because this whole COVID and pandemic is new.
Correct. See, typically the debt to income ratios are managed within 3:1 perspective. Because you see, whenever the debts are taken at a personal capacity, you will have on an average tenure of around 3 years when you see, typically one getting debt free or repaying his debts, in that period of time. When it comes to, risk factors, typically if you see pre-COVID scenario, you monitor your, bucket movements, how, the buckets are moving. But then comes something which is unprecedented, like a COVID scenario, and you suddenly see that your bucket movements are really going off the curve. And these are scenarios which brings intrinsic risk in the book. So and then you kind of do your stress analysis, but these unprecedented incidents do not counter or the stress scenarios do not counter these unprecedented incidents, because these are like once in 100 years kind of a scenario. So therefore you try and create something different, and you have to take a different approach. For example, you will try and restructure some of your books and see how you want to basically support the customers as well. And within the restructuring book also, like the other panelists also shared a very valid view that the utilization has to be seen. So for example, in a commercial vehicle loan, we know the utilization is definitely there, but to the end customer to whom or the end principal to whom my customer is servicing, if that industry is impacted, I know I have to restructure it, because for the next 1 year or so, I really can't expect him to pay anything, but he can come and give a repossession. We can go and repossess the vehicle, or he can come and surrender the vehicle, which is of no use to me. So better is that you see whether the customer has a good paying capacity or has been a good paymaster since his previous track records. And then if the situation holds true, and you have the appetite to restructure, you go ahead and then restructure the loan. And this at least gives a breathing space to the customer, and you also somehow are able to manage the book also for a certain time period.
So what kind of early signals do you see, early warning systems do you see developing for the financial sector now that it has experienced what risk really is?
So basically, the EWS systems are anyways existing into the risk management framework for almost now about a decade. What has changed in the times is basically the way they have integrated with the the data which is available in the system, the way people are using it, and the way they are expanding. So let me explain it. So when I say the expansion of EWS, today we do not rely only on the financial EWS parameters. So for example, the EWS parameters that we have developed internally, they range from financial to banking to operational data to behavioral data, and then to the microeconomic factors as well. So when it comes to financials, it is well known to everybody that we will study the key ratios, the declining cash flows, the sales and profits decrease. All those are some of the early warning indicators that we have. When it comes to banking, we will study how the payment track records have been, how many check bounces are happening, what is the over exposure that that we are seeing, how many CFRs or the central fraud repository, how many reports have been going, what are the kind of legal data or legal cases have been filed against the company. So stuff like that. When it comes to operational data, we go one level deeper into it, and we kind of study the declining capacity of utilization. So if he has, say, a manpower for maintaining a particular level of productivity, has his productivity levels gone shaken, or has there been a loss of customers, has there been labor unrest or disputes amongst him, has he been delaying payments to the suppliers, stuff like that. Then from a behavioral aspects, we do track the negative media reports, which is coming for some of our clients, how the negative aspects are growing, what are the number of suits which have been filed, because typically there'll be certain level of lawsuits, but if there is an abrupt increase in that. And then any kind of evading communications that we see that are coming with the banks for that. And on a microeconomic factor, which is the last factor, again the overall see how the overall past public defaulter list, whether he is there in the public defaulter list, or is that sector, predominantly getting hit from a macroeconomic standpoint of view? Because if the sector is getting hit, we know that there is going to be a shock which is going to come to this particular company as well. So these are some of the things that today an early warning system is getting matured with when it comes to different data sources or different sources of information which we are plugging in.
Anyone else would like to talk about other factors apart from what Kunal has mentioned?
Manoj, I think this early warning signals, early warning systems has been prevalent, as Kunal said, for years. But I think it has been really working for a corporate environment because the number of loans is very easy to manage because very small number of loans plus the availability of data on the public domain is there. Any change, for example, any change in the ratings of any organization, or any change in the sectorial, whether it's manufacturing or service industry, whether it's steel. So you get to know that there's something which is happening, and then you tag it to your own customer. But for a retail, it is very granular in nature. Today, we're funding to customers who do not have digital footprints at all. We're funding to customers, about 67 to 70% of the customer new to credit. I mean, they're first time borrowers. And then the kind of operational, the kind of large operation that we have, it makes it very difficult to create a watertight early warning system. So I think still it is evolving in the organizations, and I don't think we have completely utilized. I think in a nutshell, one, identification of the triggers is paramount, and second, execution and what you do about the triggers. Once you have the triggers, what do you really do with those customers? We need to have a proper end-to-end system that we need to create, and then measure the actionable that you get from those triggers.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
Now, if I may,
who else? Maybe Thiru wants to add something?
Yeah, Manoj. Yeah, sure. I mean, I totally agree with Kunal and Rajaram. Like the EWS thing, which is because we lend to small businesses. It's like mostly small businesses, registered MSMEs, micro enterprises. So I mean, these are all not not a high corporate lending or a private limited companies. 99% is proprietorship companies. So when we think about creating an EWS, basically what we are talking about is how to identify before the bounce. How do we identify whether these guys are going to bounce in a very practical way of telling it? Because after the bounce happens, it is not like how am I going to prioritize the collections is a different system. That is, we do a separate collection priority index system. That is a different measurement. But how do we identify the customers before the bounce? So if I may just tell what we do generally in an overall scenario is the pre-disbursement credit parameters also plays an important role, irrespective of whatever the sector, subsector it might be. Because when we measure a customer, we are measuring not only the business but also the individuals also. It is not about the consumer credit, but it is not about the commercial credit, but it is also about the consumer credit. So the pre-disbursement credit parameters, it plays a very important role, or the pre-disbursement credit score, which is basically our data science based scores, whichever we develop, that plays an important role. And then actually, as Rajaram was mentioning about the current credit bureau status of the current credit score of we do on a very regular basis, we do a scrub check from all the credit bureaus to see whether they are good with us, not good with others, whether they are good, not good with others, good with us. So all these four parameters we do. That is one important check. I mean, even though it involves some cost, it is actually worthwhile to do that. And also, we do a basic behavior pattern of the customer, which is the local market intelligence. See, only the data cannot only lead into a conclusion. How do we mix the data with the market intelligence or local market intelligence, which is the behavior of the customer, which is captured by our call center team when they call for a reminder, for example, or our loan officers or
Mhm.
whoever is dealing with the monitoring visits, how they deal with. So how do we mix this, both the digital approach with the local market, and then we actually score them before the bounce on a monthly basis, so that we will know that what is going to be the early warning signal customers whom. So but the challenge is, just I'll be quick. I remember the Maggie rule, but still I just wanted to make it quick. The challenge is the exactly what I think Rajaram or I think Kunal mentioned is, after we define this list of customers, what is actionable is a challenge. It's not easy to. I mean, okay, we have identified number one. Number two is actually about the when we external impact of any business is not kind of, see, how do we predict the COVID third wave? Maybe we have to predict some kind of external impact every 3 years, because it started from demonetization to GST to the new pollution, the BS standard 6 to then the whatever the external flood or whatever it is, or then this COVID. So we might have to do something about it, but how do we take into the external thing, for which rating agency might be an option, but it doesn't cover these kind of small sectors and sub-sectors is my point. So these two challenges I foresee personally.
Very interesting. I think all three of you have given quite different perspectives. I'd like to come to ask Vinod, based on these perspectives, what kind of data capture, data analysis can your system do, and can it also help with the post, after giving the signals, what the organization should do? As our panelists have said, that is also an issue. Is there a role for software to do something there, or to assist in doing something there?
Yes, yeah. So to reflect upon now, specifically Rajaram and Thiru were mentioning, no, and including the other panelists also. See, true. It is very true that just throwing out signals won't help. What is that we can do more with that? See, each company will have various collection strategies or its own processes, or even various operations challenges to each company have its own characteristics. Now, our Beacon AWS solution helps them take further action, automate certain tasks, do further follow-ups. Also, a tool which monitors the progress and escalates the status to management via scorecards and dashboards. See, further to identifying warnings, the solution automatically classifies our customers, automatically underlined, classifies our customers into various risk buckets. We call this activity as dynamic risk rating, DRR. So this is a customizable tool where the company, based on its collection strategy, have some preset actions to be taken. Now, the actions in each DRR buckets, all the customers who fall in a particular bucket have to flow through these actions until they get regularized or closed or restructured, whatever. Now, further, the analytic tools provides scorecards to management, where you can understand about your various loan portfolio, where it stands, what are the actions taken, what are the warnings taken up, then how did it revert, I mean the responses based on that. Also, there are few dashboards and analytical reports to help control your delinquency and gives a better understanding about your customers. So with these, if implemented in our company, will ensure a proper ROI, I mean proper reduction of your delinquency, more alert and more process oriented actions on your weak or high risk loans kind of.
One point I get from what you're saying is that it reduces a lot of human errors or human ambiguities, perhaps. And because machines, just do things mechanically, so some of those errors and some of those misinterpretations get moved. Plus, of course, I think there's a lot of functionality that you talked about, creating risk buckets and things like that. So it makes the whole thing more manageable. Rishikant, do you wanted to say something? Yes.
Yeah. So regarding my understanding about the EWS and risk angle, like we are having a lot of data in the environment. It may be internal data, external data, all data is there. We need to convert these data into a meaningful parameters or meaningful indicators where we can identify that these parameters are indicating me a risk. So while identifying this risk, we need to be very careful that we need not to be underwarned, overwarned, or not warned. Means many of the times when the early warning signals are there, we are overwarned and we are really reluctant to do the business and all. Many a time there is a underwarning is there. Many of the signals are there which are underwarned also, which are under the carpet. We are not able to understand. That underwarning is also very dangerous in the environment. We need to be very careful while assessing the parameter, whether the warning signal is very accurate and the warning signal is coming on time.
How do you, based on your experience, how do you, find the right balance between false positives and false negatives? And let me first ask Vinod to talk from the technology point of view, and then a couple of you can talk from the business point of view. So they will have the complete picture.
Yeah, so maybe I will answer it like this. See, as we all know, we are working on uncertain situations. Warning means it is a warning where it is not certain. Now, trying to find some signals where there is a chance to default. Now, here the word chance is in double quotes. What we know is that there is only a chance, which means if that chance doesn't happen, there can be false positive or false negative also. So the point is we cannot completely avoid false positive and false negative. That is a fundamental of our statistics and probability, which all this model works on. Now, what does really this false positive means? To come to our example, you predicted a default of loan. You predicted a default of loan, but actually it did not happen. It didn't default. So that is your false positive. Good, no? You predicted, but it did not default. Now, false negative. You predicted that this particular loan will get defaulted, but it already got defaulted. So it is dangerous. You thought that it will not, but it happened to be a default. Now, as we discussed, in this early warning system, there are two ways, which we do. One, one from predefined scenarios based on rule engines, we create find out warning signals. Second is via applying artificial intelligence. Now, scenario-based analysis is rather straightforward, and this works based on our rule engine. Whether it is satisfied your rule, then we are giving a signal. It always may be mostly it will be a false positive case. Now, artificial intelligence help us predict the default. We are trying to predict using logistic regression or certain other technologies are there which we use. Here we have to manage our false positives and false negatives. How best you do, that is your success of your prediction, because we are again dealing with uncertain conditions. There are two more words we should consider or know about here. I mean, this is not a statistics class, but worth making a note of this. So precision and recall. See, precision is the percentage of outcomes that are positive. Say in our example, suppose there are 10 predictions you made. You made 10 predictions, out of which 3 became true or 8 became true. So 80% or 30% is your precision, your success factor in your prediction. Similarly, recall. So what is this recall? Recall is the percentage of actual positives that were correctly identified. In our example, suppose there are, actually 8 default, and our model predicted 3 correctly. So 3 by 8 is your recall. Now, having a high precision but low recall means although the model is good, you have a model and model is predicting and it is predicting your positives also, but it is under predicting. It is not predicting properly. It is under predicting. Out of 10, you are predicting only 3. Then the other side of the coin, low precision but high recall, which means although the model correctly predicted most of the cases, it also predicted a lot of negatives also, which means over predicting. We are predicting over. Now, what is the optimum size? Both precision and recall values should be high. That is what we have to manage through our solution. Now, to put it short, no, there will be false positives and false negative for sure. But the real thrill is to optimize it so that we do prediction with best results. This will help our customer to get the better results in their prediction, thereby decreasing the delinquency, increasing the profitability and all.
So it's a recall and precision that is the true measure of the outcome of the system, the usability of the system. Interesting.
Yes.
Maths is not my strong subject, but this is simple enough to understand. Any other perspectives?
I think we should be okay to accept a slightly higher false positive than the false negatives. It is fine to have those false positives initially because you are tuning and fine-tuning your EWS system, because as Rishi said, it is dynamic in nature. The policies are dynamic. We keep changing our selection criteria. The environment changes. So it is fine to have a false positive little or a higher side. So you are a bit of cautious. You may not go in for an action immediately, but then you will at least keep monitoring those accounts. You will keep monitoring a higher number of accounts. You may not end up in legal action, but I think over a period of time, with the technology, with machine learning, with all those algorithm, I think the system itself will learn to reduce the false positives. But on the other side, if you're too completely strained on the false positives and you lose out on false negatives, so I think you should be slightly cautious earlier, and then I think it will again balance out over a period of time.
So Kunal, Vijay, what is your approach to that gray area?
Okay, see, EWS, what it does essentially is it will protect you from future losses. It will tell you, boss, these are the ones which are segments or individuals which can go bad, or like it's false negative. If somebody is already performing well, but you predict that it might go bad, you can't, like Thiru mentioned, you can't initiate a legal action on those cases. But the accounts where they start showing the stress from collections point of view, what I do, the minute there are 2 continuous months where we have to do follow-up and I still have room to offload him through a balance transfer to somebody else. So I put my business team in action. Boss, please find a lender for him and exit out of my book. I don't want to chase him for every month's EMI. So this is the early signal. So another thing, when it comes to a corporate kind of a thing, today monitoring, like Kunal mentioned, a gamut of things which are all very valid. Another thing that we'll have to also look at is promoter activity. Is this net worth gaining strength, or is it losing? Or is he adding personal assets, or is he moving his assets to some other entities? These days, there are trusts which hold properties for them. So there needs to be a close monitoring on that as well to know if this guy is planning for something else. So that gives us a trigger. Okay. So, and getting a signal that this is going to hurt us. And if you have the leeway to push it out, even if it is going to hurt 1 or 2 customers, it is better we do that rather than feeling sorry later.
Yes, that's interesting. Very interesting perspective. Kunal, you want to add something? Yours is a very focused kind of business. What kind of rules play here?
See, the rules are pretty much, confined within the risk appetite book of knowledge, which is, following the framework. So, like what Rajaram mentioned earlier, the retail book does not always behave exactly in the same way like what a corporate book will behave. And, our challenges that we have both retail, corporate, and within retail also, commercial vehicle loans and 2-wheeler loans, which are individual personals who are taking loans. So, you have to play very different in all kinds of book when it comes to, EWS. But, at the end of the day, like I said, the framework prevails, and therefore, we have something called as, a risk appetite that we have. And for that is basically for each product. So, risk appetite is what decides, what is going to be a high, medium, or low risk, how you want to attack. And false positives and false negatives, this is a cat and mouse race. Today you will win and tomorrow you have to again rechange it, like what Rishikant mentioned. It's a dynamic world. But what comes as a third dimension to all of this is, the ground market reality or the ground market intelligence. Let me give you one example. Today, the EWS system predicts that, there is a particular sector in the commercial vehicle loan that is undergoing, a stress, and there is a particular sector, which is doing very well. Tomorrow, morning, we see the fuel prices increasing. All the sectors will go down. And I don't have any control, because the trucker will say that, the fuel prices have increased and, I am going on a strike. So, what am I supposed to do? I have no option. I have to basically, say, do I build fuel prices next into this thing? Yes, I will build fuel prices. Date 2 or year 2, the BS6 norms will come. And, suddenly you see something else changing. So it's a dynamic world. And, this is always going to be there. I hope and I wish and I pray for the success of Vinod, pulling out some rabbits out of his hat and creating a kind of a perfect system. But the situation is always going to be evolving, and I'm wishing Vinod's business will always continue to grow, with this evolving situation.
True.
To reflect upon Kunal, that is very very practical and experienced observations. Absolutely agree with that.
You have to keep an appetite in your hand. That okay, I will basically have 10% of my productivity wastage, which will going to happen at the collections end, because I'm initiating an early warning system. At the same time, you will also have to accept that, the early warning signals, the positives out of it can help you in reconstructing or readjusting your credit policy. And, therefore the new bad loans can be stopped. So it's a give and take scenario. Somewhere you will lose, somewhere you will gain. And only point of difference with my co-panelists, like one of them mentioned, that if couple of customers, in our case, if we see that there is a customer point of view which is prevailing over there, then we will like to take a back seat and understand and let it pass through, and try and gain more better customer experience than focusing only on the book. So we kind of lose sometimes over there as well, but that is where the different strategies play. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong.
Perfect. That gives the big picture.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to ask Vinod that in terms of developing the software, what kind of people do you get inputs from? What customers? I mean, is it only the risk heads, or even CFOs, CEOs, CIOs, HR heads, collections heads? Kunal, you want to add something?
Yeah. Before Vinod asks, risk guys will never be his customers. We are always basically his competitors and critical friends who will criticize his outputs. On a lighter note.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Love-hate relationship. Every relationship, the flowers and thorns go together. So that's the law of nature.
Yeah, good analogy. Yeah,
Vinod,
absolutely.
What people do you get inputs from to make this software?
Very interesting question. Actually, any type of, so whenever we interact with our NBFC companies or banks, across the users, from the particular user who serves the end customer of the bank or NBFC, right from there to the top, everybody in the ecosystem have some way or the other to tell us how about their business, about their problems. See, as Kunal was telling, this is nothing. It is not just a single track which we go. There is no such thing like that. See, what we are doing now, we are creating a flexible system wherein your warning signal can be tuned based on the practical scenario down at the particular company. It is not a product kind of thing. It is very flexible, and that too, it can add some more intelligence to that. And yesterday or today, what are we doing? This may not be the situation tomorrow. So market changes. Absolutely in line with what Kunal was telling. It is all flexible. It is, dynamic, I would say. So which means a flexible kind of system wherein some of these warning signal can be adopted directly, but otherwise, you will be able to create your own signals where it can be from various three tracks are there. One internal. Internal means you have your own data repository where we try to create define signals and extract signals from there. Then you have external going out, external data. Such as CIBIL or CRISIL kind of credit rating agencies. Then there are manual kind of, where you only somebody during our discussion was highlighting that say for example our customer's partner got bankrupt, which we may not get in the public news and all. So private news kind of. So multiple types of warning signals can be created. And this should not be in a complex way. It should be simple also to operate. So with that, we have to have a system in place and do particular processes, find out the real warning signal which are appropriate to you, take necessary actions and go forward. That is how we try to manage this.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Let me ask you one question that each of you can answer in 5 seconds. Give me an estimate of the improvement in your early warning systems, the whole thing, during the lockdown and pandemic. Has it improved by 10% or 20% or 30% or 90% or whatever it is? What is your own estimate about your organization's improvement in EWS during this lockdown period? It could be just a round figure, doesn't have to be very accurate.
I would say 25%. First, the need of EWS was felt in the pandemic.
And you achieved 25%. That's good, actually. 25% improvement is laudable.
Yeah. So in during this pandemic, it has a different type of risk has arisen, right from the credit risk and cyber security risk and all. So this EWS is really helped, and people are very much talking about that before starting any business. We are always talking about the early warnings. So it has helped to change the policy also, as well as change the strategy also in the organization. So with this particular pandemic and EWS system and all, a lot of policy as well as strategy has changed in the organization. If not talking about the percentage-wise improvement, it may be 10 to 15% improvement is already there, and much more has to come now because the things are opening up now. So much more will come in the future. So 2022, 21, 22 and 22, 23 is a great year for EWS because people have learned that and we have to manage our risk in time. That is the way it will be going to run.
Yeah, Mano, just one thing that what has worked very well for Centrum, we have used certain thumb rules during pandemic. We only stuck to what is essential services, which are the ones which will thrive during this market. In the pandemic situation, the consumables are the ones which the people have to necessarily buy. Medicines are the thing that you will spend more on. Healthcare is something that you will be more desirous of. So we stuck our guns to only these segments and withdrew ourselves literally from the rest of the segments. And we had only one rule for that exceptional cases with very good track record, we will consider. Otherwise, we'll stick to this thumb rule that essential services is the one which we are going to go with. If you look at pandemic in the last 1.5 years, the delinquencies across NBFC space have gone up by 8 to 10%, starting from bounces to the same thing trickling down proportionately across buckets. But I'm very proud to say at Centrum, because we took this call and we took one more important call, we segmented our entire portfolio and all the RMs had only one business to be in touch with the client. Whether he's paying, not paying is not important. How is his business doing? How is his health doing? This was one mantra that we made all our business RMs to talk to each of their clients, be it recent ones, old ones, to make sure that well-being of his business and well-being of himself. And ensuring that we are funding only the essential services has yielded very good results for us. And you will not believe, June, our bounce rate was only 7.5%. Our bounce rate came down by almost 4% from the month of May. So, it just worked certain things which were thumb rule. We did not use a system for it, but it was more of a thumb rule kind of a thing.
Okay.
Great. That's good insight. So early warning system need not be, it can be here also. And it can yield the right strategy. So that's great. That's great. Superb. Thank you, Vijay. Who else then?
Yeah.
Thiru and Kunal.
So see, in terms of collections, we have actually during the pandemic, we have there is a, I would say that more than 50% of technical advancement we have done. In giving the customers different payment methodologies. There are we have linked with some 300 to 400 payment gateways. So how do we make them to pay even without visiting, even through customized, more of a digital payment options we have created, which definitely we would have done maybe a year or 2 years later. To be very frank, this pandemic has kind of accelerated that process. In terms of EWS, I would say that because, to be very honest, during this pandemic, because we are more worried about collecting rather than finding the early warning signals, because of whatever the nature of the business, we are in unsecured MSME loans. And already we had some focus on this EWS before. So the movement was kind of little slow. I would say that based on the data, automatically it has refined itself by say maybe 10-15%. But the focus on exactly how do we innovate more on this EWS to prevent the further damage, that is kind of yet to begin more seriously. That's what is my opinion.
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Very true.
So there's a tangible and an intangible impact of this
correct
environment and EWS. Yeah. Fantastic. Kunal.
Yeah. So, in our case, I won't be able to pull out a number, what is the percentage improvement, but what I'm satisfied and, something that we are already worked and we still, I believe a lot of work is still happening is, the breadth of EWS has gone up. If you, even if you see this particular conversation, we were largely talking about how EWS is helping in managing the book, how EWS is managing the portfolio. But, where we have worked in the last 1.5 years, especially after the pandemic, is, how we can increase the breadth of the reach of EWS. So, for example, today we track the cyber related risks related early warning signals. So, what are the number of network, hits that we are getting, which are outside of our network, because everybody is working from home. When there is lockdown, people are logged in from the systems which are outside of our secured networks. So, what are the kind of additional threats that are coming from those networks? So, cyber related risk. We are also tracking, last pandemic, when it started wave 1, we started tracking, the total number of people who are having COVID symptoms, only it's just simple, whether you have fever, cough or something like that. So that, we are aware of, the health of our employees, which are spread across 1,550 branches across India. I can't track everybody through the attendance, so how do we track it? So we built this particular, EWS kind of a thing in our attendance system. This year, we added on to that by, having vaccination when we were driving vaccinations. So we said that, if you want to operate or you want to start working from office, which everyone is very eager to do so, you better update your vaccination status. So if you are saying no on your vaccination, you're not allowed to come to office. So, and if we know collectively in a location that, this is the total number of people as a percentage of, who are getting vaccinated, then we give the branch head, a go ahead or a no go ahead to open a branch. We then tell him that you first focus on getting your people vaccinated. So, we are utilizing now EWS beyond, the financial portfolio health. And I think that is another area where, as a company, we are trying to see, how we can benefit and expand it. And, that is where risk management function, especially the enterprise risk function is playing its role. Because, that's something that they have to think and build in the overall scheme of things.
Right, that's fantastic example. In fact, I've reminded of a discussion in a collections discussion earlier that, with all the connection strategies and people could not go out and meet the customers. And hence collections suffered intensely during the lockdown. So yeah, I think all these kind of systems could have spillover benefits in other areas like opening of branches and the kind of examples that Kunal has described. I personally feel this was a very wonderful discussion. I hope each of you found it interesting, interesting bits, some insights, some useful things that you can take away. Any last comments from anyone?
One small comment that I have to make. During this pandemic, one business which really thrived leaps and bounds was these companies which were enabling e-payments. Thiru will agree. Every door they knocked, they said yes to it. So we want that e-enabling, because when my men cannot go, let it be through your WhatsApp, let it be through the voice blasts and everything. So the e-enabling of payment was the biggest thriving business during this time for lenders.
That's
agreed. 100%. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Manoj.
Thank you all very
Thank you all.
much.
Nice
Thank you all
meeting
the
you.
panelists.
Thank you all.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Take
Stay
care.
safe.
Bye.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.